Welcome to another edition of WVD Monthly, presented by XenTegra, with your host Andy Whiteside and Pete Downing, your source for all things Azure and Microsoft WVD.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of WVD Monthly with your host, Andy Whiteside. I've got Pete Downing, of course, with me. Pete, how's it going?
It's going well, Andy. Can't complain. I can't believe it's almost Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's hard to believe. It's happened quick. I don't know where this year's gone. At the same time, I guess it's okay that it's gone by fast. I don't know.
Yeah, it's been an interesting year for sure. So
hopefully there's a return to normalcy in sight. We'll find out. I think there is.
Yeah, I hope so. And I don't know. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how 2021 unfolds. So
it's been an interesting month to month watching WVD evolve. I know we've got another set of updates we want to go through here coming from the Microsoft website for October 2020. You made a joke a minute ago about it being November, and we're just now getting the October updates posted. But I guess better late than never, and it continues to roll on, it looks like.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, they call them October updates, but it was published on 11/11/2020. So I guess better late than never, right?
Yeah, that's all right. That's in some cases that's very timely, but yeah, I can get your point, right? It probably should come out like early October would have been the October updates, but hey, we'll take it and we'll review it, and hopefully if people find value. The first section here talks about improved performance. I think just like what we had last week where there was a handful of countries added, now they've got Switzerland and Canada added to the improved performance section. What does that mean?
Again, I mean, Microsoft has made the commitment to getting WVD as close to the end user as possible by, getting into as many of their data centers worldwide as possible. And, by doing that, obviously the round trip time drops, your nearest front door is closer to you. And for us, the more they expand in Canada, that's good for us because that means the data, the images, the sovereign, is on sovereign ground. So for us, that's important because we cover Canada. So
it's about performance, yeah, but it's also that data sovereignty thing where you got your data where it needs to be, and now you got your desktops. I use the kids where the Christmas presents are analogy all the time. You can't put them apart from each other because you're just creating net new headaches for yourself.
Yeah, and Canada is a great example where the data has to be in country. Whether it's an OS, whether it's data, et cetera, the cloud service has to be hosted, in country. So it's a great, great for Canada because Canada can now leverage WVD more, but it also helps us because we do cover Canada. So I'm excited by this.
Yeah. And I guess maybe a lot of it is for performance purposes, right? The further you get, the further the desktop gets away from the client connecting to it, the more likely you're going to see jitter. But it's all gotten pretty good, but certainly has to help.
Yeah, and the ironic part is if you run the experience estimator, which is a little web tool, and they measure round trip time, and right now it's showing that West Central U.S. is my closest data center, but if I refresh, probably at the end of this, it will show me another data center. So you never know. But as you and I both know, being in this world for a long time, round trip time is critical as far as performance and click and keyboard latency, et cetera. So Microsoft recognizes that, and it's great for not only Microsoft but their key partners. So
yeah. Well, it's interesting because it's not bandwidth, it's latency that's your nemesis when you talk about desktop virtualization. It's funny, I refreshed the screen 4 times and it went from triple-digit latency down to double-digit latency. And as you pointed out, now I've got US East.
Yeah.
Which, when it comes to the world of Citrix protocols and RDP protocols and VMware protocols for display, you get down in the below 50, maybe even below 80 or even 100, that you for the most part don't notice a significant change in the user experience.
Yeah, I agree. Yep.
Not for most things anyway. Okay, going back to the post here. Second section talks about Azure government cloud availability. So GovCloud, I guess, is that what it would be nicknamed?
Yeah, and this is key because we have a few customers that are government oriented and one that I personally work with. And this is big because it helps keep the security story moving forward, but also keeps Microsoft very relevant in the federal space. And you can see this through, what they call JEDI, the Microsoft JEDI project, which is getting Microsoft won the big Pentagon contract, which is key. And I think, Microsoft recognizes, again, they have to support GovCloud, regular and what's called GCC High or GovCloud High. And a lot of my customers use that we work with. So this is big just because it shows that Microsoft is committed to not only catering to the government sector, but also catering to security as well. And an interesting thing about commercial is it's FedRAMP certified, but for some agencies, isolation is key. So, GCC and GCC High is about isolation, not necessarily just security. So you can go and be on commercial cloud and still meet PCI, et cetera. But for some agencies, they have to be in their own rack, be isolated from vendor, from customer A and customer B. So this is a big move. And with WVD, it just makes it easier and also helps with interaction with Office 365 if they're hosted in GCC or GCC High as well. So it's a big feature.
Does that increase the cost for customers, or is that just something Microsoft's eating to be able to play in the gov space?
That's a good question. I'd have to run that in the calculator. My understanding is there might be a small ticking cost on the security side, but as far as workloads, not much changes from a cost perspective. And again, it all comes down to the EA agreement that the customer has with Microsoft. And, a couple of the customers we're working with are fairly large, and I imagine they negotiated pretty good EA agreements.
Yeah, I won't go into a lot of detail here, but all the money the government the cost of Microsoft back in the years fighting the whole browser wars, and I guess they're going to getting it all back from them through Azure consumption somewhere along the way.
Yeah, I agree.
So next section here talks about Windows Virtual Desktop Azure Portal updates, and there's quite a few bullets here. We'll just kind of roll through them. First one talks about fixed a resource ID error that prevented users from opening the Sessions tab. I guess that's pretty much what it says there, right?
Yeah, and I think we could go through each one, but I think the summary here is Microsoft made a big move, what they call the Spring Update, to move from a non-ARM service to an ARM-based service. And part of that, a lot of the functionality was put back into the portal and being able to manage WVD from the portal. So these are all just little fixes that I personally have hit as well. Some of these, it's funny, I actually hit that first one, a couple times when doing a demo. But at the end of the day, Microsoft is committed to, keeping the portal, for lack of a better term, tip top and dealing with issues as they roll in. I think the big thing they added in that I've noticed is they finally put the RDP settings back into the portal. They pulled them out for a while, and you had to use command line or cut and paste command to set the RDP preferences. So, for example, do you want to map a drive? Do you not want to map a drive, et cetera? Those settings are back in the portal because they were having a lot of bugs with that. But again, a lot of these fixes you see here are mainly focused on usability and making the portal more reliable. And nothing. And you and I have been in this a long time. If there's a bug, hopefully the vendor jumps on it and fixes it right away. So this is just shows that Microsoft is committed to continuing the portal improvements moving forward.
So you threw out the acronym ARM, and maybe most people know, but Azure Resource Management. And the only reason I know is because I've heard a bunch of podcasts lately talking about it. And that was the big change, right, in the spring, where they brought it into an ARM world. And then, as it's pointing out here, there's a whole bunch of bugs that got exposed during that process, and they're working to get those all knocked out.
Yeah, and I'll call it minimal viable product, right? They had to get something out the door. It's not going to necessarily be perfect, and I think this shows that Microsoft is very committed to continuing improving the product in the portal experience. Another one that sticks out here to me is the Applications tab now has pages. So before it was like applications you would manage, you'd have to manage separately. And they now allow you to manage the applications a little more granular when dealing with applications. So again, just minor improvements to help with usability and streamlining the operations.
So, Pete, I'm not gonna lie. I've waited and waited and waited. You really dive into training myself on WVD because I've got people like you and the rest of the team around me that know how to do this stuff. Has it gotten to the point where the level of maturity is to where it's going to be for a little while and it won't be changing as I'm trying to learn it, or are we still kind of holding on for the ride for a little bit?
I would say it's at the level of maturity where now they're starting to backfill some of the key features that you and I are used to dealing with our partners, VMware and Citrix, which are great partners of Azure and WVD. So I think it's at a point now where, if you learned it, the portal's not going anywhere. It's only going to get better. So things like, I can't, things like auto sessions and scale up and scale down are going to be improved. Things like, connectivity between your client and the edge is going to be improved. So it's a lot of the stuff you're going to see is just minor improvements around scaling and management. Another big one is MSIX app attach. So right now, MSIX app attach is still done through PowerShell. They're going to you're able to now use the portal to manage MSIX apps, and they'll automate the attachment of the MSIX app. So things like that. So you'll start seeing minor improvements. I think, it's a good time to start learning it because you're only going to just see portal improvements moving forward. And again, speculating based on the roadmap items I've seen.
Yeah, well, that's good. And that's one of the things about, as a service, as a cloud, it can evolve, but you just hope they don't just rewrite it on you in the middle of it. And I think it was Azure originally. I was starting to learn just regular old Azure, and it got completely overhauled. At some point, I went away from it, came back a month later, and had no idea what I was looking at.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think you're going to see that with WVD now. I think if you were on the non-ARM service and now you're on the new, it was a little. I had a customer who went through this. The rug was pulled out from underneath them. They spent all this time writing, custom JSON to get it to integrate with the current process, and now they got to go and redo it all based on the new. And Microsoft's working on a migration plan if you're still on the old and move to the new. And there's a way to do it today. It's not very cut and dry, and that's something that Microsoft's committed to.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else on the fixes that you want to cover?
No, I think just summary here. It's refreshing to see that Microsoft is committed to continuing to improve the UI experience.
Yeah, it's interesting to see just kind of small tweaks. When do we expect the next big uplift in the product?
So the rumor is this month we should see some big update. What they're calling the fall release. That at least that's what the roadmap is indicating. Again, we don't work for Microsoft, so we can't really say. But if you look at the roadmap and look at some of the functionalities that are coming out, it indicates another big, I'll say a bigger release. And this typically falls in line with their Ignite conference, which isn't happening this year, but was virtual. So we'll see. I think this month, if not early next year, we'll see a big one.
Okay. Well, and this next and final section talks about client updates, and it's got the Windows and iOS called out specifically. Is there anything specific in those two you want to?
Yeah, so I think the big thing, I'll start with Windows first. I think, one of the things with the Windows client, and again, you've iterated this on past sessions, is you have to run a separate client when you're running WVD. It's called the Remote Desktop Client, and they continue to improve that. And the great thing about it is it auto updates behind the scenes. You don't even really see it, and they're continuing to fix things. So, for example, in the last release, which is the 1.2.1446 release, one of the things they've added is an issue with smart card redirection, which for Gov is a pretty big deal, right? For anything federal or anybody who uses smart card. So, they're continuing to improve the client experience. A release before that, they fixed SSO with Windows 7. So they're continuing to improve. Now, the other cool thing is if you're an insider, you get insider builds. So you get to see some of the newer stuff. So they just launched an insider build on 11/10, the day before they announced these updates. So 1.2.1520. Nothing really big in there. You can do list views for remote apps, and they changed kind of how icons will appear. So they're constantly updating the client is the good news on the Windows side.
And then there was something on iOS as well. Is there anything worth calling out?
So iOS, again, it's refreshing to see Microsoft working on iOS. But yeah, they're continuing to improve. The latest version of the iOS client is 10.2.0. And again, they're just improvements all around. So, adding shortcut keys for, so Command S and Command N to add workspace or add PC. Being able to invoke a search UI with Command F, so Command Find, so just little things to help usability of the client, but keep the client moving forward. And it's going to be interesting to see, how much parity they get with some of their friendly partners in the space on the client side. But I'm seeing a lot of improvement. If I go up and down the list here for iOS, I mean, they've had 1, 2, 3 releases just in the month of November. So, just to give users an idea of how committed Microsoft is to updating the clients. And the same goes for the Android client, the Mac OS client, et cetera. But you're going to continue to see improvements in the client side.
So I have 2 topics for you. One is the one you just mentioned, and maybe we'll start doing this every time. What, in terms of parity to, let's say, a Citrix Cloud or VMware Horizon Cloud, you want to give me a number as to how close Microsoft is at this point? Just talking about the PaaS part of it, not necessarily the IaaS, which would be the Azure behind it, but the platform for desktop brokering and connecting to that. How far do you think we are from parity?
Yeah, that's a good question. If I'm going to swag it without really doing any deep homework, just what I know, I would say on the Apple side or the iOS side, Mac OS side, I would say they're about 50% of the way there, versus Citrix. Probably the same for VMware. I think VMware and Citrix have put a big effort into Mac OS because that's a big BYO device. Yep. On the mobile side, I would say about 50% of the way there. Where they're making the most traction is on the Windows side. So I'd say they're about 70, almost pushing 80% there on that side, just because that's as you and I both know, you can't get away from using Windows, right? In the enterprise, where it's still falling short is the web client. And, web client to me is the most important, because if I'm working from home or, I'm on a hotel kiosk machine, the web client's critical. And HTML5, they're still fairly behind on that. I would say they're will be less than 50% of the way there versus their partners in the ecosystem, Citrix and VMware. So I would say where they're the most mature is Windows. I would say Mac OS is the second, the mobile, believe it or not, and then the web is my take.
Well, that's a pretty big gap when you're talking about enterprise use cases, but it's still, they'll continue to improve it, and they'll continue to eat away at that space. The next question is regarding the Azure Stack HCI or Hub use cases, where you can bring Azure into your own edge or whatever data center you want. Have you ever found out if that's covered in a WVD scenario where you could just bring your WVD to that edge use case?
Yeah, it is. It's fully supported. It has actually been since day one, which is kind of cool. I got to be honest with you, Azure Stack, and I think you and I want to evangelize this over the next months or so, but it's one of those ones where not a lot of people are using it right now. And I don't know if it's a hardware issue or a cost issue, but it's basically bringing Azure on-prem and creating that hybrid scenario. So yeah, it's fully supported in WVD, has been since day one, but it's a lot easier now with the the ARM service being supported now. So,
well, I have to assume part of it creates a conundrum for Microsoft, because they really want you in their cloud, and having you have that option of keeping your stuff on the edge doesn't take the solution to where maybe the customer really wants it to be, and certainly not where Microsoft wants it to be, where they control your workloads. Yeah,
I agree. And just rewind really quick back on the client. the other client we forgot is Linux, and I would say Linux is 70%ish all there, and they can thank IGIL and some of the other key partners in the ecosystem to help drive the Linux side. So I think without IGIL leading the charge originally, the Linux client really wouldn't be where it is today. And due to community effort, they've been getting Linux pretty up there as well. So,
yeah. Well, it's probably time for me to start playing with it a little more and learning from my perspective where it starts and stops. And hey, question again on the Azure Stack HCI. If I'm connecting, I guess, am I going to be able to go directly to that Azure Stack HCI, or am I going to go up through the cloud and back down to get to that?
That's a good question. So let me look really quick. So I would say as of today, and this is just based on a roadmap item that I see here in front of me, it would go up and then down. So it would hit the edge and then come back down. So it's the same conundrum that Citrix had to solve. And Citrix solved it, 3 or 4 months ago with Direct Connect. So one of the roadmap items is direct connectivity between client and session host over managed networks. So that I'm assuming that's what they're solving there.
So I guess that kind of goes back to the first of this call. We were talking about the experience estimator that changes, that latency gives you a whole nother hop or 10 to have to go through. Again, maybe not a big deal, but certainly makes you wonder why not just keep it in the cloud. But maybe at that point, you're talking to desktops that are talking to applications that are local still, and maybe that's why. And you'll take the latency with the delivery protocol, but the application latency isn't there.
Yeah, and a lot of these features that I mentioned in the roadmap are actually in preview mode if you're in the preview bucket, so you can see some of these if you're actively using WVD. But yeah, I think that right there is an indicator of direct connectivity between client and session is the indicator that they recognize that in order to get Azure Stack successful, they need to have direct connect, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, no, that would solve a lot of problems, I would think.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, Pete, anything else going on you want to let folks know about before we adjourn here?
Hey, if you're interested, we're going to have a fun December with our webinar Wednesdays. We're doing a year of recap. So I got a lot of great guests in the month of December. I got the beginning of the month, I got IGIL and the CEO of IGIL joining me, Jet Ayers, and hopefully Doug Brown. I got Brian Madden with VMware coming on one Wednesday. And then I just got Steve Kaplan of Nutanix, who's the ROI TCO master when it comes to Nutanix. So I got a lot of great guests coming in December, and some awesome giveaways as well. So you definitely want to tune into the webinar Wednesdays in December. You'll learn a lot.
Hey, question. Have you decided, and I'm putting you on the spot here, but those webinar Wednesdays, have you turned those into your industry podcast, or you're going to keep those webinars only?
Yeah, I can. And some of them, they actually fit very well with the podcast. So the December ones might be a good way to do it because there'll be a lot of roundtable discussion. So it's a great idea. And I'll probably use December as the way to start that off. And then I'm doing another series next year that will be very podcast friendly. It'll almost be like a live podcast that I can do on the fly. So, but yeah, that's a great idea.
And on that note, right, we're going to be, XenTegra and myself, we're going to be starting additional podcasts. So right now we have Citrix, the Citrix session. We have On the Horizon, which is our VMware Horizon podcast. We have this WVD monthly. We're going to be adding a Nutanix podcast and an IGIL podcast. So it's going to be podcast central around here. Hopefully we'll be getting 5 podcasts a week out and continuing to provide content.
And congrats on number 50 on your Citrix session. So you got number 50, and before you know it, we'll be at number 100.
It sounds cliche, but time flies when you're having fun, or when you're in COVID lockdown, or both. But it really hasn't seemed like it's been that much of an effort to do them. It just they just keep rolling along.
Yeah. I think simplicity is key, is what I've learned, and you give them to me and I put them up.
Yeah. Yeah, we find blogs we want to cover. We cover those blogs, and we hit the record button, and then we turn the record button off. We post it. It's just an easy way to get it done, and people seem to be enjoying it. So that's great.
Yep.
All right. Well, with that, I'll let you go. It's 5:30 on the East Coast, and I'm sure you got things to do, and so do I. So have a good evening.
All right, man. Thanks, Andy, for having me.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another edition of WVD Monthly, presented by XenTegra, with your host Andy Whiteside and Pete Downing. Thanks to podcast episode guests. Podcast produced by Pete Downing. If you are interested in joining a XenTegra podcast, email info@XenTegra.com. Podcast copyrighted by XenTegra, LLC.